In this lesson, we're going to go over a little bit more how to just push contrast, push highlights, shadows, and texture a little bit more, and maybe adjust some colors. There's just a few areas where I specifically want to make a couple changes already. So one of those is I don't think I have a lot of texture in my shadows, and that's something I usually like to have a little bit more of. So I'm going to try to push that. And then this little plasma whatever from the gun, I think the color isn't quite working really well with the rest of it. So I'm going to try to do something really quickly there. So first of all, I'm going to just select this ray gun group, which I never named, by the way. And then I'm going to select that glow within it and tap the layer blend mode. And I think this is an area where that overlay is going to work really well. Yeah, so that just makes it a little bit more green. I can play with a couple other things here, like add or screen. I think overlay is probably going to look best. And you can see how that compares to normal. But I think that green fits a little better with the rest of the picture. And then to do my textures a little bit more, so I'm going to select this front pants layer, open my selection tool, and just sort of select the area with shadow here again. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect with the original selection, especially because the sort of thing I'm doing here is supposed to look just a little bit messy by default. So I'm going to go back to my favorites and select my wet acrylic brush. And then I want to go just a little darker than I have here. And so I'm going to start by just using the eyedropper tool to select the color that I have in there already. And then I'm going to go just a little bit bluer, like more towards blue in this outer ring and a little bit farther down in the color wheel. So I have slightly darker color. You can see if you compare the before and after colors up there. Just how that compares exactly. And then I'm going to take this, and like I mentioned before, I just want to kind of, well, first I need to make my brush full size. I'm just sort of going to kind of push and pull with pressure and speed, kind of to try to get a mix of sort of grainy, stampy looking things and streaky stuff. And I think that actually worked pretty well. If you zoom in, you can see there's sort of an area where there's a lot of texture, and then down here it sort of smooths out. I actually like that. But I still think there could be a little more going on here. But rather than just follow that exact same shadow curve, I'm going to come down here and just, I like to sort of just create a couple of random extra little shadows that don't necessarily, like there's not any obvious source for them, but just something to kind of break up the shape a little bit and make it more interesting. And then kind of the same thing with highlights. So I'm going to come on this other side that's in the light, and I'm just sort of creating some, let's see, some kind of subtle shapes that I can make a slightly lighter color in there. Let's start with that and see what it looks like. But I'm just going to choose kind of a color that is lighter than that, but similar to it. And then with that same brush, just come in and sort of like, just try to make some interesting little marks in there. And I think that actually worked out. I'm going to do that same thing on the back pant leg. But I think that's already a lot more interesting to look at on both of those pant legs. And then I do want to push the contrast on those boots just a little bit. And I'm going to do that with curves. I'm just going to come in here, turn on the composite, or go to the composite channel, and then kind of pull down over here. Because they're already pretty dark, the lightest areas of the boots are going to be closer to this dark end, and the darkest areas are also going to be closer to this dark end. So I just want to make a little tweak there. You can see that just makes it a little clearer that there is something going on in there besides just black. The other thing I wanted to show you was if you just feel like some of the things are a little too flat, like you don't want super flat color in places, something that I sometimes do is I'll go and add a layer over the whole thing. And you want to fill this with 50% gray. Value lets you make really precise color changes if you're familiar with RGB or HSB or even hex colors. So I'm just going to use RGB here and put each of these at half. So let's see, it's 256 divided by 2. It's I think 128, but 127 because RGB starts at 0. But basically, you just, oops, want to enter numbers for each of those. If you put every single one to 127, then I should have at least pretty close to 50%. Oh, or currently you can just type 50% in this black thing, which is maybe a little easier. So you want this 50% gray. I have this blank layer, and I'm just going to drag that out and fill the whole layer. And then from there, I'm going to go switch the blend mode to overlay, and that's in the contrast section of the blend modes. And so if I turn that on and off, you should see no difference. It looks like that is working as expected. Okay, so I'm going to open up my adjustments menu, which is the magic wand up at the top left, and I'm going to go down to noise. And you can just slide across all the way to the right, and if you wanted to, you could add this crazy amount of noise. I don't think that's the right look for this particular picture, so I'm going to make this a lot more subtle, and just by swiping anywhere on the screen towards the left, you can pull this down quite a bit. I think something like there is pretty good for what I want, because I just want like a little bit of subtle grain added to this. And then if you tap it again, that will keep that grain there. If you zoom in, you can see this a little bit better, and turn that layer on and off, you can see what it's doing. Then I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger because I want the grain itself to be a little bigger. And to do that, I'm going to tap on the Move and Transform tool up here, which is the little mouse arrow. And I want to make sure magnetic is selected. And then I'm just going to pinch outward, and it should snap at 125% or 150. So then I'm going to tap on my adjustments again, tap on Gaussian blur, and just to show you what this does, as you slide across, it just blurs whatever is on the layer. So this is a little bit hard to see because I already have subtle texture there, but as you go across, it just blurs all the way out. So I want to add just a tiny bit of this, maybe something like 2.5% is pretty good. And then just one last adjustment I wanted to do to this, and this depends on what you're looking for. I don't want this to adjust my colors at all, so I'm just going to turn the saturation all the way down in that hue, saturation, and brightness adjustment. And then tap on the adjustments menu. And yeah, so that adds just a little bit more personality to the drawing. So you can see there's a little bit of variation in the background color and things like that. And let me just see if there's anything else I wanted to do here. Going to turn my sketch back on. And I think this is actually one of the hardest parts of a drawing for me, is just deciding when it's done, because I think there's always things I would like to change. But I think this is good enough, so I'm going to call it done.